Welcome to another episode. My name is Dean Vassy. You can find me on X at hashtag Kangas, Instagram hashtag Kangaroos podcast. Today, I should say, I'm joined by someone we haven't seen for a while. He's been a very busy man, so I really appreciate ravishing Ricky Mangides for joining us tonight. Now, Ricky, before you say anything, I've got a little intro for you.
Okay.
Yeah, this might make you a little. All right, that'll do. Now, are you happy with that?
Not bad.
Yeah. So,
that was coming. So
yeah, it is a good start. I couldn't find any Rick Rude intro or anything like that, so I gave you Ric Flair. So I hope you're happy with that. Anyways, mate, how you been? How's life treating you?
yeah, that's been busy. Been an interesting start to the footy season for sure. Up and down, some false dawns, as some people interpret it as, and then a couple of disappointing weeks. But no, there's been plenty of talking points to go over. That's for sure.
Yeah, and let's start with how we usually start whenever I've had you on. What has been going on with the shinbone.com this year?
Well, there's been a bit actually. There's been plenty to talk about with each North match. That's for sure. I think with the night games, you kind of end up getting to bed about halfway through the middle of the night, which isn't ideal for sleep patterns. But thankfully they're Saturday nights rather than the Sunday twilight type deals. But to add the North reviews for obviously for every match and then the couple of preseason games as well, and then the notebook every Wednesday, which is more of a general look at the footy. If I only watched North games every week, I'd probably go insane. So that's sort of a good way to keep across trends across the league, and then keeping on stats and extra things for Patreon subscribers. So latest article today for this week's notebook was just looking at minutes played and by age is kind of a different way to look at a team's list compared to the normal sort of average age and average games played, which can sometimes be a bit distorted if you have sort of a couple of 35-year-olds and then you might have four 19-year-olds. It gets distorted the other way. Just a different way of assessing lists, which I much prefer personally to average age. So just trying to sort of give people different tools to use to analyze lists and sort of keep across the entire league. So it's been busy in addition to regular working life, but it's been fun.
That's the main thing. And just on that, like what we're talking about the minutes play, I did see that article today. Fantastic write-up. Where are we as far as list demographic with minutes played for age groups? I should ask.
Well, it's an interesting one because I mean, like, it's not a foolproof way of looking at things, of course, but
Yeah, of course.
So as of first four rounds, so I basically divided into four categories. So sort of the age 22 year and under. So when I say age 22 year, that just means the person turning 22 this year and under. Between age 23 and 25 years, so which means again people turning 23 this year up to people turning 25. The age 26 to 28, and then age 29 and over. There's no scientific explanation for why I choose those four categories. It's just like, yeah, it looks about right to me. So where North sit in those categories, so for age 22 and under, they've been given the fourth most minutes in the league. 23 to 25 is 12th. 26 to 28 is 5th, and then 29 and over is 12th. I mean, and in a vacuum, you don't necessarily have to be first in a certain category and 18th in another category. That's just how it's broken down through the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much well summed up there, Ricky. And do you still have the price range tiers to join to subscribe to your newsletter? Because as far as I know, I just get it automatically taken out. I don't even look at it anymore. But do you still have those different tiers?
Yeah, there's three different tiers. So there's a $2.50 a month, which is just like a way of showing support, I guess. Doesn't actually give you any extra tools, and then there's a $5 a month, which gives you a few extra exclusive things. And then the $10 a month, which is sort of all the marbles, throughout the footy season. So basically goes from until the depends on whether I do stuff for trade period, but it's either the end of September or end of October, depending on what we think is or what it looks like is gonna happen in trade period. So looks like there's gonna be a bumper one. I'll extend it out to October, and if not, then we'll end it with a grand final.
No, that sounds good. No, for me, just pay the premium. And if you want to be a smarter supporter, then get behind Ricky's work. It costs nothing really, and you support one of your own as well. Deep dives in each game, so you can make your own depth chart for North. So you're pretty much filling it up with midfielders and half forwards. Lots of options. So let's get behind Ricky's work for a pretty low price. Yeah, couldn't have sold it better myself, Ricky. What do you think of that sales pitch?
That's great. That's great. I'm looking forward to the subscribers rolling in now.
Well, you might get one or two. Who knows? All right, enough half volleys outside off stump, Ricky. For you, what happened last Saturday night?
Oh, nothing good.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I think we've all watched those games where in a few minutes in you can spot trouble. And the Saturday night was one of those games. Sydney came with a pretty clear plan to sort of stifle that North ball movement, either stop Daniel from getting the ball off half back, or if he did get the ball, stop the second and third options in those chains. And the ball use kind of devolved into, if it was kicking, it was sort of short and straight and really safe. And the handballs were, by and large, they weren't really damaging handballs. They were kind of just flicking around. And I mean, in isolation, short handballs that, don't break lines, they're fine if they set up the next link in the chain. But when you combine short, straight, slow kicks with handballs that don't threaten an opposition defensive setup, then you get what we saw on Saturday night, which was basically a whole lot of nothing in possession. So, and that's been a recurring theme, I think, over the first few weeks. Of the Melbourne game, most of the joy there came from stoppage. There wasn't a huge amount of joy from sort of open play. I mean, there was some, but sort of round 1, 3, and 4, we've sort of seen the similar sort of issues pop up from an offensive point of view. There's a few different reasons for that. I mean, there's the sort of lack of multiple distributors off half back, and then it's people adjusting to new roles. So like McKercher's still sort of settling into that wing role. For as good as O'Sullivan's been in his early few games, expecting him to come in and have 25 to 28 a week off half back, that's just not him. Which isn't a knock on him. It's just unrealistic, right? And which isn't to say he's been bad at all. But so there's just there's a few issues with the ball use, and I think a few tweaks need to be made. But the flip side of that is it doesn't take much for this sort of short kicking handballing to suddenly look dangerous. So like Brisbane last year, they had I'm rolling off the top of my head, so I hope this stat's right. The second highest percentage of short kicks as a percentage of their total compared to the league as a whole. And as far as I know, they won the flag last year. So
won it pretty well too.
Yeah. So, but the difference is like they change their angles, and their short kicking has some impetus to it, and it challenges the defense. So they already have the short kicking. They just got to put a bit more speed into it, and then if the handballs start taking a bit more ground, I mean, they don't have to be the Giants. Giants in a category of their own right now, but after 4 weeks, now that we've finished round 4, North sit third in total handballs across the league, and they're dead last in terms of average meters gained per handball. So that's not the combination you want, basically.
No, it's you seem like you're a bit concerned here, Ricky. I'm a bit worried. Usually you're pretty positive, but you seem like you're a little concerned going into after the first 4 rounds that this is going to be a trending pattern, and unless things change, then we may get a few more losses coming up.
Yeah, I think it's part of. I think if we go back a step, a lot of you look at the loss Saturday night against Sydney, and a lot of the initial reaction was, "Oh my God, what are they doing? They don't know what they're doing." So it's not that. It's not. I'm going to do something I don't want to do, but in terms of like if you go back to the Noble years, that second year, every week it's like, oh, good lord, like they're all over the shop. They're playing one way one week, another way another week. It's all out of whack. Like it changes, and this isn't how the game should be played in this current state. It's not that. It's just the state they've gone that North have done this week and against Sydney and the week before, and the issues are it's clear to see what they want to do. They also just don't quite have the tools right now to beat the good teams playing this way, which is why I think they need a couple of shifts with that short kicking, get a bit more speed into it. And again, that's not completely up to them. It's not completely up to them. If a team comes and defends you really well, there's only so much you can do, right? Which is why it comes back to sort of, I think you need another distributor off half back, someone who provides some contrast to Caleb Daniel. Because at the moment, sides are either loading up on Daniel and stopping him get the ball, or if he gets the ball, they just chop everything else off. So we've seen it the last couple of weeks in particular. How many times has he got the ball and looked up and is kind of like deer in the headlights because the opposition's done really well in shutting all those other outlets off. So having a bit more of a varied attack, I think, is a big key in just getting past what we saw on Saturday night. So, I mean, identifying the problems is one side of a skill set, and implementing the solution is another. I don't know what the exact changes are in terms of how you implement it. That's why the coaches get paid the big bucks, or in the case of the assistant coaches, the medium to low bucks, judging by the coaches' reactions to things. But yeah, I think it all just comes back to sort of making a couple of issues and shifting a couple of things with that ball use, especially out of the back half, considering how important that is in today's game.
Now, you mentioned this a few weeks ago. I think you wrote an article that there was concerns even back in pre-season with Caleb Daniel being the only distributor. I mentioned during the week, I think it might have been yesterday actually, last night's podcast, that I sort of thought that maybe we need to put Colin McKercher back on the half-back flank. Would you be behind that? Because he does have that little bit of pace, skill, line-breaking ability, rather than, let's say, Darcy Tucker, who's probably a very one pace, doesn't really add anything too much offensively. Would you be behind something like that? Is that something you think needs to change, or is it a system thing in general?
I think it's a bit of both. So at the moment, when you think about it, there's basically been one distributor of halfback, and that's been Daniel. So I mean, like I said, O'Sullivan's been great. This is not meant at a whack at him in any way, because I think he's been great and he's going to play 200 plus games as long as he's fit. But you need a second distributor to play the way that North want to play. So the way that North has structured up their back seven so far, they've had three key defenders. So Logue, Comben, Core, and then when Logue's out, Pink's been in. On the weekend, we had Whitlock come in. So there was four. And then there's kind of been two general defenders, McDonald and Arch. Obviously, Arch got suspended. So then that's kind of been a rotating one. And then the distributors have been sort of McDonald, O'Sullivan. Sorry, not McDonald O'Sullivan. Daniel O'Sullivan. And then a bit of Tucker. But they're just not the types of players that you need to sort of bounce and threaten an opposition defence. So they need
and that goes with Harry Sheasel as well. You mentioned that in the article the other day as well.
Yeah, correct. So they made a bit of a change. Like, I know the easy thing to do is look at a heat map and say, oh, Sheasel played half-back on the weekend. Like, he didn't play half-back. His midfield time was basically spent on the defensive side of the ball, not playing a defensive role, but basically playing as that sweeper to try and kickstart some of the ball use. So it looked to the naked eye like he was playing at halfback, but he wasn't. But I just think if you have sort of two, I mean, like Daniel's strength is his kicking. He's not going to break lines with his run, his carry, and Sheasel's similar, right? So I think you have two of the same players. Again, it's pretty easy for teams to sort of lock down on that. So, I mean, you look at when the ball use was looking all right off halfback at times last year, there's been a bit of a contrast. Like Fisher tries to run, sometimes runs himself into corners, but that's okay. Compared to the kicking and the Kircher and Sheasel and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, we saw in the last quarter against Sydney. I'm always reluctant to sort of when the sting's gone out of the game that much, be like, oh, this is the big solution. But I thought Hardiman was all right in the last quarter. I think he sort of provided that bit of a contrast. So maybe that's the way to go. We saw the injury report yesterday that Arch did a minor hamstring, so he's out for another week or two. I'd feel sorry for Whitlock or Matlock based on the North debut announcement. I felt sorry for him making his debut in that game because I mean I thought he looked quite comfortable, but just the general team structure sort of made him look like the odd man out. So maybe you go back to your three talls this week. McDonald, Tucker as your two general defenders, and then you have Daniel, and you look for that. You change that seventh defender. Maybe it's Hardiman, Maybe O'Sullivan comes up to a wing. Maybe you change McKercher somewhere. You make a bit of a reshuffle around there. Because what they did for the Sydney one was they basically, got rid of one midfielder, but then it was kind of a bit unbalanced with the way they omitted Phillips. So I just think they need to change something. There's options. There's plenty of options. It just depends on which way they want to go to bolster that sort of back half ball use.
No, definitely. I mean, the last 2 weeks have been against very challenging teams, haven't they, Ricky? They've been very good teams who know their system. They play a high press. We've got to find a way to break that high press because teams are working us out pretty quickly, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And Gold Coast will be more of the same this week. And Gold Coast probably is another level in terms of their high press compared to an Adelaide or Sydney. Adelaide and Sydney are defending really well. Sydney changed their defence a little bit from last year with Dan Cox as coach, but Gold Coast are super aggressive, which doesn't come as any surprise to anyone who watched Hardwick at Richmond. Now he's implemented more tools like that at Gold Coast. I mean, when Gold Coast have been running really well the first few weeks, like you could just put Richmond jumpers on there and it wouldn't look out of place to a few years ago when the Tigers were flying. So which just goes. And I mean, I feel like I'm repeating myself, probably getting a bit boring to some people listening, but there's just got to be a way to sort of stretch the ground, stretch a defense. Because the way, like, if you picture a field, right? Picture a football field in your head. What an opposition defense wants to do is they want to constrict the team in possession into a smaller and smaller and smaller area, and then force the turnover. So at the moment, North are kind of playing into their hand by only moving it in a small area, right? So it's just about making the whole ground a threat. So the defense has to cover more ground, and that way then there's more room to move. That's a wild oversimplification of how easy it actually is to move the ball, but that's kind of like the basic principles of both sides.
I mean, there were times, I think, in the first half where we did switch it and we were able to get some open space when we moved the ball with a little bit of pace. So there is potential there, but like you said, we're kind of not getting the game on our terms and we're playing into the opposition's hands far too much. And it's going to be very much the same this week against Gold Coast unless things change. Unless we do see changes, then it could be another similar result. I think you even mentioned that in the article. Let's go back to the Melbourne game. We had an impressive 10-goal win. Did we possibly get lucky that game? Because a lot of people are saying we're butchering the ball too much and we are turning it over in bad. Do you notice? Actually, I'll ask you this. Do you notice that we are turning the ball over in bad areas of the game where we can't defend the turnover?
I mean, and part of that comes back to the way that the ball use has been in terms of short and slow, and the handball's not really taking meterage. That sort of stuff pops up. I think with the Melbourne game, it was a good win.
Of course,
the difference between that game and the other three is that the way Melbourne play is very straight lines. They don't have that sort of, those varied offensive modes to hurt you. So the flaws in North's game weren't something that Melbourne were equipped to expose. So then when North got on top through the midfield, which again is the strength in terms of stoppage work, they responded really well to, from a stoppage point of view, to where they struggled against the Bulldogs. Then you get what we saw in patches against Melbourne. The issue is no one in the history of football ever, apart from maybe under 12 level, will kick seven goals from centre bounce every week. So that part isn't sustainable. The interesting part, actually, to take a slight detour, is I had Adam Simpson in the ears at the MCG while I was there Thursday night for Collingwood Carlton, and he mentioned offhand, I'm paraphrasing here, but excuse me, he said it gets easier to score from turnover than stoppage the longer the game goes. And I thought, that's interesting. So I kind of did just a look at the stats, and I mean, I'm not saying I was questioning the man, but it's actually quite noticeable how easy it is. How much easier it is in the second half to score from turnovers compared to the first half, and so the stoppage scoring drops off in the second half. So expecting that sort of volume of scoring from stoppage isn't sustainable, and that's a part of the reason why we see Carlton's second halves. Just to go on another tangent, but the whole overall point of it is the stoppage stuff is great. It's a great tool to have in your arsenal, for sure, but the general open play ball use is probably the number one issue that needs to get fixed. Because if that's fixed, defending becomes much easier as well because the opposition teams aren't in a good spot to springboard as soon as they get possession.
Yeah, I mean, we go back to the Melbourne game and we had that purple patch in the middle of the, first 6 minutes of the last quarter where we just got every centre clearance and kicked 6 goals in 6 minutes. I mean that's a very rare thing. You might get that once a year, and that's probably happened. So, we've certainly got things to work on. And I guess another thing is like Charlie Comben got, I think, 8 intercept marks. He dropped a couple that game too. He could have easily had more. He had 12 intercepts all up. On the weekend, he was nullified. Is he an important part of that back line as well to get those intercept marks?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for defenders, and forwards, I guess, to be honest, in a way, is that part of their performance is dictated by how good the pressure around the ball is from a defensive point of view. Like if sides are allowed to sort of just wander out of congestion, there's only so much defenders can do. Like on Saturday, you could have had 4 Silvanis, 3 Scarlets, and 3 Mick Martins, and there could have been 10 people back there, and it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference. The interesting part with Comben, which I mentioned, I think in the Adelaide post on the Shinbone, how he went from playing on Darcy in round 1 to basically playing on a smaller medium forward and just letting him roll up against the Crows, and similar sort of thing on against the Swans. So that was interesting. It's a pretty big shift in philosophy, which actually makes me confident that the coaches are seeing the issues and working to fix them from a bigger picture point of view. But yeah, he's been crucial. I do like the way he just keeps competing, and a lot of people, when they have the setbacks he would have, not only big picture with all his injuries, but in game with a couple of the drop marks, like they just call in a hole, but he just keeps going. That's a trait that very few people have, and that's what will put him in good stead for a long time to come, as long as he stays healthy.
No, well, he dropped those couple marks, I think, pretty quickly in the second quarter against Melbourne, but still seemed to bounce back. And like you said, he fought back really well. And a lot of people can go to water and become a shell of themselves and almost look for a hole to dig themselves into. But no, he certainly responded. And I read somewhere that, or heard somewhere that he's had over 20 surgeries in his life. He might have even mentioned it himself. So that's a lot to take on your body for such a young man. I think he's only 23, 24 years old as well. So, yeah, but we certainly need him at his best, like a number of others. Now, a lot of talk about ODU lately and his contract worth. How have you seen his season so far?
Yeah, pretty good, I think. I think it's been good. Adjusting to sort of not necessarily having that sort of 90% midfield time. It's dipped down a bit. Don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I'd need to pay another 6 figures to Champion Data to get that. But he'd play a little bit more forward. I think it's been good. Round 1 there was a couple of iffy moments in terms of structural things, but he wasn't alone on that. We all saw the footage a bunch of times, and since then I think it's been good. All the word seems to be that it's only a matter of time before he's officially announced as re-signing and staying. So he must be liking what he's seeing internally and must have some confidence. But yeah, I think he's been playing well.
Just on that, now, a lot of people are saying, well, he's not worth that money, 1.4 million over 7 years. I mean, it is a lot of money. It'll be around 10 million over 7 years. I mean, he's certainly worth that. I mean, he's got the potential to be the best midfielder in the competition. And if you're not going to pay him that, who else are we going to pay that to?
Yeah, it's a bit that way, isn't it? I mean, it's tricky to judge the raw dollar value without the salary cap is going up.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know it's going up. So, this year you could pay someone sort of 8% of the salary cap, but then that same money in 3 years might be 6% of the salary cap. I'm just throwing numbers out there hypothetically. It's not an actual statement. So, what looks massive now might not be massive in a couple of years. So, and also in context, you don't know what other people are being paid and when that money comes off the books. So, it's a little bit of guessing games, trying to figure out, is this actually too much or is this actually too little? Does this hurt them long term? But I mean, I think from a club point of view, it's just can we achieve what we want to achieve, which in this case is re-signing LDU, without hurting the club long term. So if they're offering this money, they must be confident that yeah, it's all planned out.
It sounds like it. I mean, there is a lot of talk about other players. Braden Maynard, in particular, he was on. It might have been a morning show the other day, and they asked him directly, "Are you going to go to North Melbourne or for the money or something like that?" And he said, "I will wait and see what happens," which sort of suggests that he's considering it. I mean, there is talk of 6 million over 6 years, but we all know that that could be anything. But would you be comfortable getting someone like that into the club? I mean, we just mentioned that we probably need a rebounding defender, a guy that can play on smalls and can play on the mid-sized forwards as well. It'd be a handy impact, but he'll be 29 years old later this year, and what would you be comfortable as far as giving contract length and money? I mean, you've mentioned the salary cap is going up, so that's not an issue. But what would you be comfortable with as far as contract length with a 29-year-old that's probably still got some good football left in him and has been All Australian, good leader at Collingwood as well? What would you be comfortable with, I guess?
Well, firstly, I refuse to believe that 6-year contract thing was ever legit. There is no way.
I agree.
No way known someone gives a 6-year contract to a 29-year-old halfback. There's just that absolutely not. I struggle to believe that any part of 6 years, 6 million is true. It's an interesting one. He's basically from a pure player point of view, and not taking into account anything in terms of like stylistic and all that sort of stuff and personalities, and purely from an on-field point of view, the person he'd take in the backline rotation as it's set up at the moment would be McDonald's. He's basically an upgrade on that, right? So like if you look at Collingwood play, they are one of the most well-drilled sides I've ever seen in my life. And so they're very structured. Even though it looks like they're playing chaotically sometimes, everyone knows where they have to be at all times. Even when things are going badly, like that second half last quarter and a bit against Carlton was a perfect example. Like they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they did it, and they carried it out. Now, doesn't mean they win every game, of course, but so that knowledge that he brings over to a side that doesn't always know where it wants to be at all times, I think it's fair to say, would be a massive help. He's also not a primary distributor. Like we've been talking about before, he's more a secondary, plays, like I said, plays small, plays medium, can play tall at a pinch, that sort of thing. So I think it just depends on sort of the capital in terms of money and that sort of stuff, and whether it's enough of a sizable upgrade to make it worth investing that much. If I had to guess, I think he's going to stay at Collingwood. It doesn't seem like the sort of guy that would leave. So I'm almost a little bit reluctant to go too far in it, because I just can't see why he'd leave Collingwood. Maybe he doesn't want to be one of 23, 32-year-olds in 3 years' time. I don't know, with the way their list is going. So, so the way I look at it is he'd sort of be upgrading that sort of secondary distributor, versatile defender, I think is the best way to do it, which is probably underselling what he can do. But we'll have to wait and see what happens, I think.
Well, managers will generally put out to the media, sort of saying, "Oh, this club's offering this," and put a little bit of sugar on it to try and price, get the value up as much as they can for their client, which makes sense because this will be his last big contract. There's no doubt about that. So, and they just want Collingwood to up the price. They're probably offering him 2 or 3 years, and I think more than likely he stays, and he's saying the right things to the media. I've got to consider all my options. So he's driving his own price up, and at the end of the day, players have got to look after themselves, because once football's done, and you probably never see, you probably won't get a job that as big as money as that. So
exactly. I mean, I think when you compare, so I assume we've all seen by now all the reports that came out a few weeks ago about how Nathan Bull was really close to signing at North. Similar-ish types of players in terms of secondary distributors, very good structurally, great experience, sort of that late 20s, last big contract type of thing. So it's clear that that's the sort of area they're looking at to bolster. And maybe that's going to be part of that next backline sort of evolution in how they set up, like how we look at what we're talking about before in terms of 3 keys, 2 sort of general defenders, 2 rebounders of varying degrees of success. Maybe that if they're looking for another 1 or 2, and then they reshuffle that a bit to maybe it's like 2 talls and then a couple of guys who can play, tall or medium and that sort of thing. So sometimes it's a little tricky to analyze their moves because we might not know what their next steps are.
No, definitely. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out anyway over the course of the year, and probably over the course of this week, how the team balance goes in that back 6 or back 7, as you say, because it's probably the biggest talking point at the moment, trying to get that balance right. We'll continue with the midfield. Now, Will Phillips, unfortunately, omitted last week. Coming off a couple of games where he subbed out, only had the 12 possessions in round 3. And then was, missed out last week and did well in the reserves, had 25 touches, 8 tackles, 10 clearances or something like that. What do you think he is at? Because it's a big contract year for him as well.
Yeah, it is. I got asked about him over on Big Footy a couple of weeks ago. Shout out to Big Footy. Basically saying, what do you think? And I think we're basically playing 6 mids. But I'm going to basically 6 midfielders. And, for better or worse, or whether people disagree or agree, he's the 6th person on that list in terms of priority. So his role was kind of more or less to do the dirty work, clean up after everyone else, blocking, not necessarily be the guy who takes charge, not necessarily the first priority as a target at stoppages, that sort of thing. Do the blocking, do the defensive stuff, and I thought he carried that out, pretty well. Like he's doing his role. But with that role, it's kind of like last one in, first one out, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's the easiest one to change if you want to restructure elsewhere. We saw on Saturday night that restructure did not work. Having basically 4 key talls back was not the way to go. Wardlaw potentially could come back this week, played limited minutes on the weekend. Whether they want to play it safe and get a full VFL game into him before bringing him back. Maybe they want to sort of avoid a plane trip. One more game. Oh, there's no VFL game this week, isn't there?
No, there's none. No, not till Good Friday, I think.
Yeah, so
the next one.
Maybe Wardlaw comes in and Phillips kind of has to bide his time for an injury potentially. But yeah, I thought he did his job well through the first few weeks. It's just the natural consequence of that role is you don't have much margin for error when there's a change pegged elsewhere.
Now, talking about that, do we have too many midfielders in the team as far as team balance goes, Ricky? Because is it forcing out a player maybe that should be getting the game? I've always used Eddie Ford as an example, but he's a half forward. He can't play any other position. He can play on the wing. He has been trialled there. Do we have too many mids in the team at the moment?
No, I don't think so. I quite like that sort of forward half setup in terms of the way it's set up from a personnel point of view. So we basically have 2 key forwards, Lucky and Darling, 2 general forwards, half forwards, whatever you want to call them, in Zerha and Curtis, and then 2 smalls in Constanti and Hansen. And Hansen's kind of the more higher up the ground, kind of the third winger, I guess, and Constanti's more the sort of the ground level pressure type. So basically 6 forwards, and then the mids sort of they rotate through there. So LDU, Sheasel, Parker, Simpkin. They all have different roles when they're playing as a forward. Some are like actually as a forward, and then some are basically as a forward in name only, and they just immediately come up to the ball anyway. So I think it's a pretty good mix and a good way to make the most of your resources. You look around the league at other teams. Some other teams play sort of 7 or 8 forwards, and then those forwards pinch it in the middle. And then some other teams play again like 6 forwards, a similar setup to North. So like for example, Port, they roll Rosie, Butters, Wines, Drew, every North supporter's favourite player, Horn Francis, Mead. So they only basically play 6 forwards as well. Sometimes, even though they're in a bit of state of flux at the moment. So no, I actually like the mix in terms of how best to utilise personnel. Hanson's been quite the last sort of 2 weeks. Maybe they look to make a change there. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a start of the season, and I think it's been all right.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about the new recruits. How have you seen the Jack Darling? We've talked a little bit of Caleb Daniel and Luke Parker addition so far this year. We're crying out for leaders probably last couple of years at least, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Darling's been great. He's basically
Yeah, I agree.
given what he came for. I'll just start with him, but you can tell there's sort of a bit of what's the best word to describe it? I guess a bit of teething problems because I mean, ever since Larky became number one key forward, as harsh as this is going to sound on all his key forward partners, he's never had a viable number two.
No,
that has any sort of proven AFL track record. So he's never been able to learn how to play with a number two. And so Jack Darling comes in, played second fiddle to Josh Kennedy for, however many years it was, 10, 11, 12 years, so many years I lost count. Darling's forgotten more about how to play in a forward line than most people will ever know. So there's a big learning process there in terms of, by the end of this year, Larky should know so much more than he did at the end of 2024. So you can see they're kind of still getting in each other's way a little bit in terms of figuring out leading patterns. Things that come second nature to Darling just like wouldn't pop into Larky's head, which isn't a bad thing. Like it's just inevitable because of what we've seen in the last few years with all the list cuts and whatnot. So, but you can see the benefit he's brought already, just in terms of when it does work, the spacing, north of scoring pretty well once they get in there. Apart from obviously the complete shambles that was Saturday. The previous weeks were good, so you can see the benefit he's made. And he's willing to put himself up to do the dirty work, like the second ruck stuff, which has been fine. Parker's been good. Felt a bit sorry for him on Saturday night. That's the way that your first game against your old club has to go, especially considering how amped up he was. But yeah, again, similar sort of thing. I think the benefit of him will get more and more pronounced as the weeks go. Because at the moment, it's still sort of early season. Everyone sort of has, hey, let's go, let's play football. When people get in form slumps, when people are having dirty days on the field, that's I think when Parker comes up and really shows his value the most, if that makes sense. And Daniel we've covered. I think because he's the most noticeable guy ball in hand, people tend to use him as a scapegoat a little bit. But we sort of have to keep in mind the offensive issues we were talking about before. Just because Daniel looks confused, it doesn't mean it's his fault. It's
true.
It's a team-wide thing and movement, and it goes back to those issues that we've already covered for about 15 minutes. So we probably don't need to go over it again. But no, I think all three have been very useful in their own ways.
No, definitely. I think you even seen in the Adelaide game, those three players had a huge contribution in keeping the game competitive. And I thought Luke Parker was our best player on the weekend against the Swans as well. So, yeah, look, like you said, they've all had their benefits. I think Caleb Daniel needs a little bit of help. I think he's averaging 28 possessions a game or something like that. A lot of them from kick-ins, though, but
yeah, he's good, coach. No, I'm not complaining.
Exactly right. So, yeah, I think a lot of people are happy with that. As long as he doesn't butcher the ball anymore. I think he's. I think 4 of his 24 kick-ins have come from goals or something like that. So from the opposition. So. Yeah, but that's all right. What about the impact of Finn O'Sullivan? You've been happy with him. He's almost done the Colin McKercher, Harry Sheasel role in their first year, gone to the halfback flank.
Yeah, I've been very, very happy. I've been surprised isn't the right word, but it was noticeable straight away how assured he was for a first-year player. And I mean, to some extent, like top draft pick, I think the draft classes over the last few years have probably spoiled people like league-wide because of how many of them have been able to come in and start contributing straight away. But just instantly, it's like, oh, no, he knows exactly what he's doing. He already looks like he's played 60, 70 games. Right? Yeah. I think it's probably fair to say he's not going to be the sort of 32 to 35 possession type of guy, at least based on early output anyway, but he's going to be a star. I've been super impressed with him every week. Still finding his way, of course, and there's still little learning points, but just his positioning, the way he just twirls, and someone's going to crunch him on that blind turn very soon.
Of course, yeah.
But I've just been really, really impressed with how he's settled in. So he's going to play 200 plus games.
Where do you see him long term? Do you see him more in the midfield that goes forward, similar to probably what Shiza or LDU are doing, or do you see him like probably next couple of years staying the halfback flank?
I think he's a midfielder. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he's if all goes well, and North go to where we hope they go in the next few years and competing at the pointy end of September. He's strikes me as the guy who does a bit of everything in the midfield.
Yeah.
He has your offensive stuff. He has your defensive stuff. He leads. He's a structure guy. There's no breakdowns. Well, there's minimal breakdowns when he's around. That's the role I see him settling into when his body's, he's put on the extra size and his body can cope with playing midfield every week. So this sort of early look at, he's played a bit of wing, he's played a bit of half back. I think this is kind of like his education in terms of just putting a bit more flexibility and versatility in his game. So that's where I see him long term, and it's all about learning all the sort of peripheral stuff around that to help round his game out in the meantime.
No, sounds good. Yeah, looking forward to seeing how he develops over the next couple of years. Now, I've been getting a lot of talk. Now, I've been getting a lot of comments about Zane Dersma and where he is at. I think it's still a bit too soon to judge him, but he hasn't had a pre-season, Ricky, this year at all. He's had shoulder surgery, shoulder problems. I can't remember exactly. But how, like you've been involved with North Melbourne Football Club, how important are pre-seasons for players?
Oh, it's crucial. Only the very best can get away with no pre-season and still play well. I mean, I think I mentioned Carlton before, but you look at Sam Walsh over there. Like he hasn't done a full pre-season in a couple of years now, and now all of a sudden he's still fine. Like he's not a bad player, but he just looks like another guy.
And he looks a shell of himself.
Yeah, like he's been a guy and he's been fine and maybe above average, I guess you can call him. But that's what no pre-season does to you. Like when Walsh is up and flying. Like we saw a bit earlier in his career when wasn't dealing with like the back and all that sort of stuff. Like this is what happens when you have no preseason. Like your body just can't do what you want it to do. And Dersma will be the same. So I think I've watched bits and pieces of VFL. I haven't watched last week's game at time of recording. But apparently there's some reports that he's not quite 100% with his shoulders still, which makes me think that it might be a bit more of a learning this year. Because once that preseason's gone, it's hard to get that time back. So I do remember at the start of last year that saying that he'd be a slow burn just because of the type of player he is. Players of his archetype don't necessarily come in and light the world on fire straight away. So I don't think there should be any panic. I'll be honest, I don't know where he settles long term. But I think there just needs to be a little bit of patience and just let him go and just try to get that body right, get some games into him, and then see what happens there.
And I think a lot of expectation goes on players that are usually top 5 picks, which is he was pick number 3 or 4 or something like that. So there's always this added extra pressure. But like you said, it's a slow burn. You know, just because you pick 4, it doesn't mean they have to rush and be all Australian players within their second, third year. Not everyone's like Harry Sheezel where they can just hit the ground running from the first game onwards. So
he's that rangy type of player that let's put a bit of size on. You can tell his instincts are there. Like that's half the battle, right? Like sometimes you see players make their debut or the first few games at VFL level or sample level or waffle level or whatever, and it's like, I don't know, don't know what I'm seeing here, but you could tell straight away that Dersma has those instincts, which I guess isn't a surprise given the family he comes from. And then it's just a matter of molding it in and figuring out, okay, well, where's the best place to use those instincts? I'm pretty confident it'll come. I'll be honest, I don't know exactly where it comes or when it comes in terms of position or time, but it's just a matter of being patient and sort of letting him go at his own pace, basically.
And there's nothing wrong with developing your game in the reserves. Now, he has been playing a lot of VFL midfield time in the last couple of weeks. There's nothing wrong with playing reserves to develop your game, is there?
No, God, no. I mean, some of the best players of all time played a lot of VFL.
Michael Tuck.
So, I think it's completely normal. I think the players that come straight in and stay in their respective AFL sides, they're the ones who aren't normal. Because it's just that's the outlier,
100%. Yeah, but Yeah, we'll move forward. Now we have Gold Coast this week. You even mentioned in your article that if we continue to play like we have last 2 weeks, this could be a dangerous result. How can we be competitive against the Gold Coast Suns? Because they're a very strong unit right now, aren't they?
They are. They are. They're playing well. They're playing really well. They're definitely a final side if they don't do Gold Coast things and figure out a way to stuff it up like they have at times over their history. I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the ball. There's going to be a couple of shifts in the ball use. If it's going to be if it's going to be a short kicking style with high handballs, that's fine. The short kicking has to be quicker and it has to be more using more angles rather than short and straight. So the kicking has to be quicker and on more of angles, and the handballs have to be doing something, as simple as that sounds. They can't just be rolling around in a circle and not actually challenging defense. So, which is why I'm not like sounding all sorts of panic alarms, but because it shouldn't take too much for the base to just shift a little bit and threaten defenses. So, I would imagine there'll be a couple of changes in the back half to help with that. And then the midfield has to step up. So, Rao, much like the start of last year, he started like a house on fire. He's been great. Anderson's been great. Miller's played a bit more forward, which has allowed Humphrey and Flanders a little bit more midfield time. So they've got that depth in their on-ball rotations they didn't necessarily have the last couple of years, where it was just basically Rao, Anderson, Miller all the time. They've got a couple more people rolling through there, which is nice. They've added to their half-backs. Now they have Rioli and Noble there, so they've got a couple of good general defenders in Powell and Newland, and obviously their talls back there, and Collins and Andrew, and then Jeffrey's playing as that sort of pseudo third tall. So they're a very balanced side, and they're playing very, very well. So it'd be a good challenge, and I think from a North point of view, it's more kind of how have they learned from last week, and what changes have they made. So whether that results in a win or not, who knows? I'm not as fussed as that. For me, it's more what have they learned from the Sydney loss, and to a lesser extent the Adelaide loss before that.
Yeah, a lot of criticism has come in on Alistair Clarkson, the coaching staff. A lot of media people have probably been a bit lazy with his assessment, sort of saying, well, they're not going anywhere. But there's a little bit of pressure on Alistair Clarkson right now, isn't he?
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Like, who decides there's pressure on him, right?
Yeah, I guess it's the media, isn't it? So
yeah. And then how much does that affect? Not to get all philosophical, but how much should that affect the club, right? If a couple of people with a radio show saying, so and so's like Ricky's not a good coach, like, does that suddenly make me not a good coach, or does that suddenly make my job under pressure? Or if someone says, I don't know, someone says Ricky's not a good kick for goal, does that criticism suddenly make me work harder on kicking a drop punt? Like, it shouldn't. It shouldn't really change anything. Yes, I mean, to me, that's kind of people talking to Phil Collins.
good point.
I'd be surprised if anyone internally took some of the external criticisms seriously.
Yeah, you'd certainly hope not. Yeah, I mean, it is.
I listen to, of course. So, like, for example, if some people came out and said, "Hey, this is what I'm worried about, A, B, C, D," and presented it in a way where it's like, "Oh, actually, no, this actually makes more sense." So, like, say, I'll bring up Simpson again, but if he came out and said, "Hey, this is what I'm concerned about," and presented all the vision and stuff like he does, it's like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, you might have something." But if it's just if you go from anointing, North of here, they've arrived after they've kicked 7 goals from centre bounce, and then 2 weeks later say, "No, they're no good." That's just kind of swinging with the wind. So to me, those opinions don't really matter, apart from just getting a bunch of people commenting on your social posts and getting good engagement.
And that's right, and that's what half it is, I guess, with the media personalities. So very philosophical there, Ricky. I feel like I'm smarter right now. So yeah, what do you?
But yeah.
What do you think is a pass mark for the club this year, Ricky? What is a good result for the club going forward? Do we measure it based on wins or other metrics?
Well, before the season, I was hoping for sort of 7 to 8 wins. That's depending on injury runs, of course. Then there was an article that on the AFL website that Clarkson did an interview with Riley Beveridge, who's very good at what he does. And one of the measures that Clarko brought up was how many games they're in late. And I thought that was really interesting because I haven't really seen other teams or other coaches bring that sort of topic up. And if you compare it to last year, there were the 3 wins. There were 3 or 4 more games that North were in late but lost, and then there was sort of, whatever the remainder is, 14 or 15, that the games were basically out of whack by early in the last. So, like I said, one of our measures is we want to be in more games later, which I thought was really interesting. So, I mean, if you look at the season so far, obviously there's been the Melbourne win. I think you can probably claim that, it probably depends if you're glass half full or half empty, the Bulldogs game, whether you say they were in that halfway through the last, and then the Adelaide and Sydney games were, what they were. So I thought that was a really interesting measure, actually. Seems like that's something they're gonna judge each other on.
Yeah, which is fair enough, I guess. I mean, ideally we want to see the wins and more competitive performances. It's pretty simple as that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's the interesting part. Like when you judge that measure, like would you rather say, I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but would you rather say 7 wins and then 7 games that you were in late that didn't, or relatively in late, and then I don't know, 8 blowouts, or would you rather fewer wins but more close games? So like you can probably judge it however you want. So you might have 10 wins but 12 blowouts. Like you might have more total wins but you're in less games, and you have 10 losses of 10 goals. Like what does that mean if you still have 10 wins? So I think it's a really interesting topic. You can sort of go around in circles for hours on end and probably not come to a consensus either way.
No, and that's exactly right. I go by, I'm a little bit old fashioned, Ricky. I'm a lot older than you are. I go by the Dennis Pagan theory. You're judged on your wins and losses. It's pretty simple as that. So, do you look at percentage as a measure as well? Well, not really.
Sometimes, which is a bit of a cop out of an answer. I think that the current generation of players are much better at sort of just letting a game go and still bouncing back the next week, if that makes sense. I think if you were sort of 10, 15 years ago and you concede the last 8 goals of a game and lost by 80 points, that would sort of send you into a spiral, where we see a lot. And this isn't only footy related as well. It's across a lot of sports where you can let a game go. You can concede the last, because basketball, concede the last 12 points of a game or something and lose by 20, and it's not, and they can brush it off their shoulders much better, which is why percentage doesn't always
reflect.
Be a sort of a reflection of where they are. So I think it's more a case-by-case basis with percentage. Like sometimes they might be trying and still getting belted, and that's the worry. So I think it's a bit different. Kind of got to adjust with the times. If you ask me, 6, 8, 10 years ago, I'd be like, absolutely, 100%. All the time I'd look at percentage. But yeah, I think now it's just a little bit different, and that's just because people are different and players are different.
No, definitely. Times have changed. Definitely. Probably, as recent in the last couple of years. All right, Ricky, you have been very generous with your time. Where can people find your work if they want to follow you? And where are you most active on socials or anywhere?
Yeah, so the website is theshinboner.com. Obviously, got the North reviews every week. We'll have, ideally at some point in the week, in the year, we'll have bonus posts during the week, depending on if we've got more fun stuff to talk about. And then we have the notebook it depends on if you're a Patreon subscriber or not, when you get access to it, but every either Tuesday night or Wednesday night. That's the website. The socials, Twitter and Blue Sky would be my 2 main ones. So Rick M18 on Twitter and Ricky Mangitis on Blue Sky. That'll be the 2 main ones where you can find me. And yeah, that's it from my end.
Is Blue Sky pretty active? I don't know much about Blue Sky, but a lot of people sort of say it's okay. It's less political than X because that has gotten very political. But how is Blue Sky going for you?
It's peaceful, which is nice. There's been a strong sort of US and UK audience migrate over. So for me, when I follow my basketball and my Premier League and stuff, I get a lot of source a lot of my news from there actually, because that platform doesn't sort of downplay links. So it's actually been great for me from that point of view. The Australian audience probably isn't quite there yet. There's small pockets of it, but it's peaceful and there's a lot less people arguing. And it's just compared to Twitter where anger is promoted. So
it can be, definitely can be. A few people have come in with comments. Look, Cuzzy says, let's talk about Hawthorn. They play a style where mid-season draft picks and rookie players can look like stars and play with such freedom, or we have top 5 picks that are guns that look lost and get beat. I mean, you can't compare it to Hawthorn, can you?
Sam Mitchell's a genius. I've said it for years and years. Ever since he became coach of Hawthorn, he is a genius. He's such a good coach. His style is very fun to watch. For anyone that's the fun part, there's a million. I could talk about him for half an hour, but probably the most fun part is when they get the ball at halfback from a contest. Just watch who ahead of the ball. And very few, if any, Hawks actually run at the ball. If they're already ahead of it, they run away from it. They literally physically run away from the ball. And just like the running lanes they create for each other, they're really well drilled. And they know exactly what they want to do for each other. Part of that comes from sort of the institutional knowledge that was left there by Clarko, even though they sort of treaded water for towards the end of his tenure. They've still been a relatively stable club. Obviously, there was all the racism stuff, but from a football point of view, there's lots of knowledge there. They've been relatively stable, so it's not like the North case where it feels like the club's had to restart from the bottom a bunch of times in the last few years and trying to make up for lost ground now. But yeah, Mitchell's a genius, and I really, really enjoy watching them play. Their structure is really interesting. In the pre-season documentary, that Full Sweat documentary, they had Tom Barras talking about how Hawthorn play a bit of a different system to everyone else, and I think you can see that now because, I mean, you look at their list, right? You wouldn't say it's the most talented list on paper, but they just win every week since they were 0-5 last year, and that system really helps get the most out of everyone's strengths. So, I think the coaching staff's really good. They get the most out of everyone, and they're really, really fun to watch play.
And that's how it is at the moment. Yeah, they seem to get the most out of their players, and it's a good example for other clubs to follow. Like you said, they're very different in how they play, and it seems to work for them. I mean, they're winning games. They've rebuilt very quickly. I mean, I guess, before I let you go, I mean, we've had a lot of things that have gone against us as well over the last 5 years. Ben Cunnington was certainly turning into one of the best midfielders in the competition. Until he got his cancer diagnosis. He come back the same player, and that's fair enough. His health was jeopardised, and he's still having health issues as far as I'm concerned with other things. And we've had Taron Thomas. We're not going to go into issues there, but we lose a player of that quality for nothing. That hurts as well. We've had the racism saga. I mean, you can't compare the past on both these clubs sometimes because I think we've been a little bit unlucky as well over the last few years, Ricky.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I touch on it semi regularly in the blog, where it's like,
of course.
I mean, the common refrain, which makes perfect sense. This isn't having a go at anyone who says it. It's like, so and so started their rebuild after North, and now they're better than North, or so and so started their rebuild at the same time as North, and now they're miles better, like Adelaide for instance. And like I use the Crows as an example, like since they started their rebuild. In the same year, like in 2020, Adelaide and North were bottom 2, right? If I'm remembering correctly, Adelaide have been super stable since then. Very conservative, yes, and they could have been where they're at now earlier, but everything they did was very balanced, very measured. Okay, now this year we're going to do this, and then next year we're going to do that. You could argue it's cost them a year or two, but now you look at them and it's like, okay, look, their forwards are good, their mids are good, their backs are developing really well. Maybe the halfbacks are a bit, not as good compared to everything else, but when you have the talent elsewhere, then you can get away with those sorts of things and compare that to sort of North's over the last few years where it's just been a million different coaches
Yeah, of course.
Bad things happen, and this is the end result. So, but no, North are making progress, and I don't mean to say it's all doom and gloom, but yeah, it's just kind of starting from a long way back. So when you start from a long way back, you've got a long way to go before you catch everyone else.
No, and that's the thing. We've still got a long way to go as well. So yeah, we just unfortunately we just got to be a little bit more patient. That just comes with the territory. Anyways, Ricky, thanks so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again one day soon because the people are asking me in my DMs, "Where are you, mate?" But you are a very busy man, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I'm pretending to be busy. No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, very busy. But always enjoy coming on for a chat, and it's definitely not all doom and gloom. I think the base system is there for what North want to do offensively and defensively. It just needs to be tweaked, and I am confident that we'll see the first stages of those tweaks this week against Gold Coast.
Sounds good, Ricky. I'm feeling positive about it. And if we get done by 10 goals, you'll be hearing from me, Ricky. So you said we're gonna put in a competitive performance. But no, seriously, thanks so much for coming on, Ricky. I really appreciate it, mate.
No dramas. It's always fun. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to all your listeners as well. We'll be back on tomorrow at this stage, going through the teams. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell your mates and whoever about it. Send Ricky a message, tell him how good of a job he's doing on the Shimbono.com. That's it from me. Bye for now, and go Roos. Sorry, mate, I held you up a fair bit. There's a lot to go.